This is Chasing the Horizon, a podcast by, for, and about motorcyclists, brought to you by Dunlop Motorcycle Tires and the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America. Welcome to episode 35 of Chasing the Horizon, released on the 15th of October, 2018. I'm your host, Wes Fleming, and if you've ever wondered what copper can do for a motorcycle, stick around. You'll find out. Let's kick off the news with two items from India. First up is a new executive for Harley-Davidson, who have named Sajeev Rajasekharan, pardon me if I screwed that up, as their new managing director. In addition to taking over Harley's India leadership, he'll be running their in-country sales efforts, managing the dealer network, and using their marketing and operations team to expand sales in the country. By the way, and this is something I just learned this morning, a managing director is more or less equivalent to a CEO. It's a role used a lot in British businesses, so it makes sense that an Indian business would also use that role, given the heavy British influence in their business culture. Rajasekharan was an executive VP for Suzuki, but has also worked for Panasonic, Electrolux, Samsung, and other companies, so it sounds like Harley has chosen somebody with extensive customer-facing experience to run their operations in India. Second, it's been more than 20 years since a JAWA motorcycle was made in India, and indeed the iconic Czech brand that seemed to be everywhere in the 1950s hasn't been much of anywhere in the last couple of decades. They currently only make a few models in Europe, based off of 350 and 650cc engines, but we could be seeing a lot more of them on the road soon. An Indian company called Mahindra & Mahindra licensed the JAWA brand in 2016, but they only just announced that they're going to start making motorcycles. M&M is doing the work through its subsidiary, Classic Legends, and they plan to unveil 3 new JAWAs on November 15th, going after the market with a new 293cc liquid-cooled single-cylinder engine. It's likely to be heavily reliant on nostalgia and retro designs that are increasingly popular, as companies like Royal Enfield are dominant in that segment of India's motorcycle market. If you've listened to recent episodes, you know this episode is coming out the day after AIMExpo ends, so there have been a bunch of new bikes announced during the past few days. I've been talking about the Indian FTR 1200 a lot, actually almost incessantly, but that was unveiled before AIM. I saw 2 new bikes at AIM that I think will excite a lot of people, so I'll tell you just a little bit about them. Kawasaki introduced its new 636, that is, the ZX6R Super Sport bike with a brand new 636cc engine. They took a break from production in 2018 to revamp the bike and are back with a bike packed with technology, including ride modes, traction control, clutchless upshifts, and upgraded anti-lock brakes, not to mention a spiffy electronic dashboard and LED lights all around. Yamaha showed us their new YZF-R3, a lightweight sport bike aimed at entry-level riders and sporting the first major revision of the platform since it came out in 2015. The bike didn't get a bump in displacement, it stayed at 321 cc's, but Yamaha has taken styling cues and technology from its MotoGP program and filtered them down to their smallest sport bike. The fairing and windshield use what they've learned on MotoGP tracks to improve the bike's aerodynamics. They've also fitted a brand new front end centered around a slick inverted fork. That required Yamaha to redesign or update everything from the clip-on handlebars through the triple clamps and on down to the Dunlop SportMax GPR 300 tires that come standard on the bike. Both of these new sport bikes look fantastic. Kawasaki are hoping the ZX6R rejuvenates the apparently slumbering 600cc segment, and Yamaha is content to let their rivals go after that while they take on the task of bringing high technology and serious design work to the smaller sport bikes. I'm going to talk a lot more about the AIMExpo in the next episode, but before I move on, I want to relay one of the comments I'm hearing from a number of industry folks on the show floor, and that is surprised that BMW isn't at the show with any new bikes at all. As a matter of fact, they didn't even send their demo truck that holds all the bikes people can test ride. The new Boxers are out, and everybody knows that the Motorrad Co. is going to be showing off a new S1000RR at EICMA in Italy next month. We've known for a while more or less what the bike is going to look like, but spy photos coming out of Spain lately are confirming things ahead of that show. The RR is expected to put out around 200 horsepower and come with upgraded and updated technology, but we'll have to wait until November to find out any more details. I'm not entirely sure why they didn't capitalize on the excitement about their bikes that was everywhere in Columbus last year, but I'm not privy to the corporate decision-making process, and I'm sure they have some reason. Maybe it's as simple as getting people this year talking about why they're not here, so they'll be thinking BMW, BMW, BMW next year when the show goes back to Columbus. It's also possible that since their sales are effectively flat through the first 3 quarters of 2018, with just a 0.8% drop in worldwide motorcycle sales, maybe they're counting on EICMA, which is a huge show, to give them a boost in sales numbers. I guess we'll see what happens. There's 2 more things I want to tell you about before we get on to this episode's guest. First up is that American Flat Track has announced its 2019 schedule. Their 2018 season just wrapped up. Congratulations to Jared Meese for another championship win. So while winter is making us dream of next year's riding, I hope you'll start planning at least one trip to an AFT race. Now I know I dig me some World Superbike and MotoGP racing, but flat track racing is visceral and exciting at a level that's hard to express. It's well worth one trip a year to see the spectacle. The AFT season for next year kicks off in March at Daytona Beach in Florida, runs all spring and summer, and then wraps up in late September or early October. It looks like there will be races next year in Georgia, Texas, Arizona, California, Illinois, Kentucky, New Hampshire, Ohio, New York, South Dakota, Pennsylvania, Minnesota, and New Jersey. So it's likely that there's one within a few hundred miles of you if you live anywhere in the USA. Last thing before we move on is I want to bring your attention to the Women Riders World Relay. In 2019, there is a massive effort to run a relay of all women riders to go around the world. It's an exciting event that is sure to bring increased awareness to the sheer number of women riders all over the world. You can find out more about it, including how to participate, by heading over to womenridersworldrelay.com. I'll also put that link, along with others to these news articles, in the show notes, so if you have trouble remembering things, like I often do, you can just head over to chasingthehorizon.us and check out the page for this episode. Because this podcast is sponsored by the BMW Motorcycle Owners of America, in every episode I highlight one benefit of being a member. I admit it's an enticement to get you to our website and to get you to join for at least 1 year. I've been a member since 1999 and have used the member benefits to my advantage countless times since then, especially the roadside assistance program. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about today. Today, it's about the MOA getaways. The getaways are like mini rallies. There are 10 or 11 or 12 of them, depending on the year, spread across the USA from March through November. The series of getaways is almost over for 2018, but there's a full slate already in the planning stages for next year. Chances are good that one of the getaways is within striking distance of your house, and what's better is you don't have to be a member to attend. Point your web browser to bmwmoa.org and click on Events in the menu bar to get more information you might need about the entire getaway series, including getaways in Kentucky, Arizona, Texas, Vermont, and a number of other places across the country. The first getaway in 2019 will be in Alabama, so get ahead of the registration curve and check it out now. In March 2018, Indian Motorcycle put the word out about a contest they were running called The Wrench. The idea was to get amateur custom bike builders to submit ideas based around the Scout Bobber. Dozens of people responded. 3 finalists got the nod from Indian, plus a bobber and a $10,000 budget, and the contest kicked off in earnest. The finalists' bikes were shown off at the big rally in Sturgis in August, and we were treated to a chopper, a cafe racer, and a bike from Fred Juarez, ultimately the bike that won the contest. I had the pleasure of getting Fred on the phone a couple of weeks ago so we could chat about the contest, his bike, and a little bit more. Fred Juarez, welcome to Chasing the Horizon. It's good to talk to you tonight.
Hey, Wes, I'm glad to be a part of it.
Thanks a lot for making time out of this. I know that things are busy. You got a day job, you got a family, so I really appreciate the time.
No, really, I really appreciate your time. It's kind of cool to be a part of it.
Awesome, thank you. So one of the things that I like to do is, because we're going to get to the big reason why I'm talking to you, which is the Indian Scout Bobber build-off. But I always like to get to know people just a little bit and find out how you got into motorcycling in the first place. Whether you came to it as a kid, riding mini bikes, or you were an adult and you got a Ninja or whatever. So how did you get into motorcycling in the first place?
I have to give the credit to my parents. When I was a kid, they bought us, me and my brother, some dirt bikes, and that's kind of what started it all. And working on bikes was something that we had to do because we had to keep them running. It was kind of our job to keep them running. Parents would supply the parts and support us that way and take us to different races and things, but we had to work on our own bikes.
Oh, that's really cool, because that's not something that I usually hear when people say, oh, yeah, I started on dirt bikes. I don't usually hear, and I also had to work on my own bike when I was, 12 years old or 14 years old or whatever. So what about being kind of in that position to work on your own bike kind of helped you solidify that I want to ride motorcycles, I want to work on motorcycles, I want to build motorcycles?
I'd say it started off with working on to keep them running because I love riding so much. It was just a necessity. I had to make sure that the bike was running, and anytime we went racing, I had to make sure that mine, my brothers, and any friends that were going with us, all their bikes ran properly. And it kind of got like a reputation in the neighborhood with the kids that I ran along with. That's the guy that take it to get work done. So I kind of got a lot of experience just working on other kids' bikes. But it was a lot of fun. I mean, it's a labor of love. Motorcycles are fun all around. Yeah,
absolutely. So you ride dirt bikes for a while, and you're working on bikes. How did you make the transition to riding on the street?
So that was, I guess I have to give the credit to my dad, because he had originally got me an old CB when I was, in college. And I had always wanted like a sport bike or something, because I thought they were cool. But he got me an old sport bike, and the CB 750, the 79. And it was really with the intention of making a go-kart out of it. It was just wanted to use the engine. It was an old bike that had been sitting in a pecan field covered in mud for years.
Oh, no.
And he brought it home one day, and he bought it like $50. And from there, it was kind of sat there for a while. I didn't really do anything with it. And then I got the idea. I was like, well, since it's not running, it's not working, let's just chop it up. And that was the first time I chopped a motorcycle.
So the very first motorcycle street bike you owned, you started cutting it up to see what you could do with it.
Yeah, I had started working on muscle cars. Just, I had a bunch of friends and my own cars that just wanted to work on cars and fixing them up. And, anytime you're a kid, you got an old car, usually it's pretty banged up. So
yeah.
I had to, do some sheet metal work, and then you start getting into it. It's like, oh, well, I want to change the transmission. So you start making like transmission mounts. You start, buying welders and things like that. And at that time I was in college, so I was going through mechanical engineering degree program, and I had access to machine tools, and I really enjoyed working on them. So just saved up money little by little and started buying my own tools.
There you go.
So I could do it all at the house. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So you're in college and you're working on mechanical engineering. Now, I have to admit to a little bit of ignorance, because when I think of an engineer, my first thought goes to somebody who builds systems. An electrical engineer builds electrical systems. A mechanical engineer builds, mechanical systems of some sort. But how do you kind of define what being an engineer is?
I think to me, it's the practical application of physics, really, at least for mechanical engineer. I guess in engineering in general. So it's understanding the science and understanding it well enough that we can manipulate, I guess, the world around us to, like you're saying, make systems and do things that that can either build or manipulate the world.
Gotcha.
So for me, it was the mechanics thing was, from when I was a kid, my mom sold parts, so she was always working on cars and stuff. And so it was kind of like I guess a lot of the kids that I went to school with were into mechanics. They like to work on cars and things like that. So it was kind of a good place for me. I was able to work on cars and had a lot of peers that were into the same kind of things as me.
Yeah, and I imagine studying engineering, you took a lot of really hard math classes.
Yeah, and when I started the whole program, I didn't really know much about math, and getting into it is kind of like a little bit overwhelming. But I found that I really liked it because I wasn't really much of a student as a young person, like in high school. But I found that when I was in high school and I took auto shop, it really focused me. It really gave me direction. Whenever any semester that I had auto shop, I got, straight A's because I was actually making sure I was going to school every day. It was just motivation.
Right.
Like you hear about, they're required to keep a certain GPA for sports. It was kind of that way, but it was just a way for me to, want to go to school. So, I found that as very, anytime in life there's teachers along the way that kind of point you in the right direction. I would have to say that my auto shop teacher was definitely one of those inspirations.
Yeah,
he's the one because I wanted to become a motorcycle mechanic, and he suggested, he says, I think instead of working on them, I think you should be designing. That's what he told me when I was, maybe a senior in high school. And he's the one who suggested I go for engineering.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really find it fascinating, that your auto shop class in high school kind of, meant so much to you, because in a lot of places in the U.S. now, you can't even take auto shop in high school anymore.
Yeah, that is kind of sad. I know it's something that we pushed for when I was in high school was getting machine shop, because it was a vocational program. They were very big on getting kids jobs when they got out of high school. So, kind of pointing them in the right direction so they could find a vocation instead of just churning out, kids that can do math or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But he kind of completed the whole loop for me and pointed me in the right direction, even more so than, say, a counselor would have. He suggested I go to engineering school, and at that time I had no idea what physics was or calculus, but, I went that summer right after high school because I was so pumped about becoming an engineer, because I thought it was, he kind of opened my eyes. So at that point I went in, head first and started taking all the courses and just getting waist deep in stuff,
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's not usually the story you hear about kids that go to college. Usually, I didn't know what I was going to do. I was kind of reluctant. I wanted to take a gap year. Graduate high school 1 week, college classes the next week. You're just going to pound it out.
Yeah, I was really adamant that I would finish college in 3 years, just because I was so into it. And it didn't end up turning out that way, because I started really getting into the machining and welding and all that. So I kind of slowed down my senior year, and I kind of took it easy so that I could kind of relish in all the mechanics and all the, really soak up all the learning and just the doing part of it.
So I'm kind of buried a little bit of the lead here, because I've read up about you. There's been a number of articles since you won the build off, and almost every article in the very first paragraph says the NASA engineer. So I'm curious how you went from college to working for NASA, which I imagine I know not everybody that works at NASA is a rocket scientist, but you actually work on rockets.
Well, I work on systems that work on rockets. I wouldn't say that that's something that a lot of the guys have been saying. I'm not a rocket scientist by any means. I'm not gonna lie about it. I'm a flammability test engineer, so my day-to-day thing is, when people ask me, I say I burn stuff for a living. That's literally what I do. We burn anything that goes up into space. It's usually whatever is in the crew habitat. We'll burn plastics or materials, anything say some funky things that we've got in our iPads and guitars and laptops, things like that we burn. I do that, and we also do a lot of tests for metals. So we'll burn metals in 100% oxygen to see how on the system side of things, to make sure that they're safe for oxygen systems, because anytime you have a propulsion or crew life support, you need oxygen. That's all part of it. So
right.
Oxygen is the space station. You need oxygen systems. So we do a lot of testing for that. And that kind of parlays also to testing oxygen systems or materials for oxygen systems in, like, say, the medical industry or like the airline industry. We kind of have like a diverse list of customers that we help out.
Well, that's really fantastic too, and it's really interesting too, because you're kind of breaking up the stereotype of a guy who builds motorcycles, especially motorcycles that look as avant-garde as the one that you made, bobbers and choppers and hardcore cafe racers like some of the other bikes. I usually, in my mind, I don't think of NASA engineers and motorcycle builders in the same sentence. But here you are busting up those stereotypes.
No, that's kind of cool, man. I'm kind of flattered that you'd say that kind of thing, because, that means a lot to me. I really look up to a lot of the builders, and I look up to a lot of people in the field that I work in, so it's kind of cool that you'd say that.
Yeah.
I'm not quite as good there.
Well,
go ahead.
I was just going to ask you how you got involved with the Scout Bobber build-off in the first place.
Honestly, and I said it a couple times and I laughed, because it was really the FTR 1200 that piqued my interest. I had read a online motorcycle magazine article on the motorcycle. Man, I just thought that was a beautiful bike. So maybe for 6 months after that, I was obsessively looking up. Almost every day I was looking up just to see if they had any new post on it, or if the thing was actually going into production. I was just really excited about it because it's just a beautiful bike.
Yeah.
And I guess my Google's the one that, like your phone, you have that your Google, it kind of just predicts what you're looking at, or kind of takes what your search history is and gives you suggestions on other things you may be interested in. That popped up. And I was hanging out with my wife, and I was kind of just, again, obsessively looking at the FTR 1200, and out pops this thing. And I couldn't even believe it. It sounded out of this world and pretty unreal that somebody would come up with an idea like this to just offer the little guy a chance to do something like this. And I showed my wife, and I'd been into this hobby since way before I met her, and she knew how passionate I was about it, especially in the beginning. Obviously, you get older and things happen, your priorities shift. So I haven't been really doing it much lately, but she saw. Well, I told her about it, and she was pretty excited about it. She says, "Well, you have to enter." And I said, I might not even get it. And she said, "Well, woulda, coulda, shoulda. You're going to have to do it, and if you don't, you're going to regret it." So, and I told her, "Well, if I do get chosen, you realize how much work this is going to be." And she said, "Yeah, well, it's your dream, it's your passion. Do it. You do. If you get involved or not, well, at least you tried." So I tried, and I'm pretty pumped and kind of struck to the floor that I made it this far and then actually won the competition. It's still unbelievable at this point. I'm still in shock.
I imagine. So when I don't know how these things work, I saw the news about the competition, and I knew I wasn't going to participate, so I just kind of stopped reading about it, knowing that I would see more when they started doing it. And like you, obsessive about the FTR 1200. I can't wait for it to come out. I'm already planning on getting one. I'm super excited about it. So how much knowledge did you have about Indian before the contest came along? And before the FTR and all that?
Like maybe, what was it, 15 years ago? Maybe 18, 17 years ago, I had seen that they had the company had been resurrected. And then I had seen some stuff real recently that, maybe in the past couple of years, that it had been bought out by Polaris. And that was kind of cool because, the whole Victory lineage, I thought, oh, that's cool. They're going to bring some really good engineering to the product. And then when I saw the Scouts come out, I really love the engine just because it's liquid cooled and it's it's like breaking the mold. It's like, hey, we don't have to have cooling fins and air cooled engine, and it can still look cool. So I had been following, but I wouldn't say that I was really aggressively passionate about the brand. It's just, I kind of, was out in the cursory. I've been thinking about buying another motorcycle that I actually didn't chop, because I've never had one that hasn't been chopped. So I had considered having one of the Scouts. But after this, I really read about it and, started getting into all the old engineering articles about how the engine was built and how the frame was built, and it got me even more excited about it, because it's really cool. A lot of times you see these motorcycles have the frame kind of is cradled inside the engine, and I thought this was a really cool throwback and, kind of like an homage to a lot of the older motorcycles.
Yeah.
And some of the Ducatis with the stress member frame, I really dug that. And that was part of when I started drawing the whole thing. I wanted to make sure to keep that, because I think that's a pretty special feature on the motorcycle.
Yeah, so that's a good way to transition into how you came up with your design, because while I'm talking to you, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at a picture of it, and it's really an amazing front to back. There's that swoop over the top that defines the top line, the space, the negative space between the frame and the tank and the engine. The wheels, it's stretched out. It's like, so I'm looking at it, and I see bobber and chopper and cafe racer all in this one bike, and it's seamless. So I am absolutely curious how you came up with this design for your bike.
So something that I had, there's two things I really wanted to try to encase. Well, first thing is that I definitely wanted to make a frame. It's like, if I'm going to draw this up and I'm going to build something that I'd want to build, I'd want to do a whole frame, because I love building frames. That's the first thing. And I had considered doing like a tracker, or considered doing like a cafe racer.
Okay.
And I had drawn all these different drawings up, just real quick sketches, like a real crude, man in the loop kind of drawing, where there's a guy sitting, just to kind of get an idea of like how the lines flow together. And I showed my wife all these different ones, and she's seen some of the other bikes that I built. And, I have one here at home, and she calls, affectionately, she calls the Seahorse. And the reason she called it is because it's kind of like you sit inside the bike, kind of. So
yeah.
It's a drop frame. You sit inside the bike. And I've always liked that kind of style where when I'm riding it and you see me coming, you're coming, we're heading towards each other. The only thing you see is the top of my head,
Yeah.
where my eyes figure the tank. So I had drawn one like that, the one that I ended up building, and she's the one who suggested, why don't you just stick to that? That's something that you love to build, and that's something that and I really think you should run with that. And I told her, but I want to do something different. And she says, it might be old news to you, but it's to other people it may not be, because that's kind of your style, so just stick with what you know.
Well,
so I go ahead.
I was going to say, it sounds to me like your wife is an incredibly intelligent person. She inspires you to get involved in the contest in the first place, and then reminds you to play to your strengths.
Oh man, I can't say enough about my wife. She was a huge source of support in so many ways throughout the whole project. I mean, obviously, when you have a little girl, a little child, any gender, I guess. When you have a kid at home, there's a lot of responsibility. When you have a home, there's just a lot of upkeep.
Yep.
And throughout the whole process, she was right there next to me, either in the garage with me, cutting spokes and painting the bike, or just being the support system that I needed, and supporting our baby and making sure the house was maintained, kind of thing, like it's not falling apart, kind of thing.
Right.
She just source of support in so many ways.
Yeah.
But yeah.
You had 3 months to work on the bike. That's it sounds like a long time, and I know it probably wasn't long enough, but 3 months is a good chunk of your life to set aside to do something.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I mean, we felt it, because my baby, we're a tight-knit family, and my baby, she's attached to my hip, and there was times where I couldn't have her out there because it's dangerous for her, and she was just, bawling at the garage door, like, Daddy, come back in.
Oh.
And it was probably one of the hardest things, just not spending as much time with my family, But it was worth it in the end, because we all got to spend a lot of time together. And the cool thing is that my dad came over for maybe the last month and a half. He was over a consistent basis, and I think the last 3 weeks he was here almost every day. And him and my daughter, they got really close in that time, and that was one of the other, great outcomes of unintended outcomes of the whole project, was just getting closer with my family.
Yeah, it's really fantastic to watch a little kid especially make that family bond with somebody, like a grandparent especially. But we went through a similar thing with my daughter when she was about 2.5. And just because of my wife's work and my work, our daughter ended up spending a lot of time with my father, and they're practically inseparable to this day. So that's really fantastic.
Yeah, it's really special, and that's cool that you were able to experience that as well. It's very special.
So I want to ask you a few more questions about the bike itself, because I'm not an expert. I've been riding motorcycles for a good long time, and I know enough to kind of work on my own bikes and things like that. But so I'm looking at your bike, and really the only part of it that looks like it's untouched and it's not even untouched. The engine looks like a Scout engine, and the tank mostly looks like a Scout tank. It pretty much, to me, looks like you built everything else.
Yeah, I used wiring harness, obviously engine and tank, and controls.
Okay.
I would have liked to, again, like you said, I would have liked to got a little deeper into it, but I had to. That was one of the initial questions I think Hot Bike had asked was, how does your job prepare you for the build? And I would say that there's two things. One is schedule. I'm very cognizant of schedule, and I'm always aware of how much time I have and how much effort I need to put in order to make that time crunch. And the second thing is coming up with a contingency plan. So I had planned on making a couple other things and doing a couple other things, but I had also left it loose enough that if I thought that I didn't have enough time, I would be able to rely back on the stock components or some other easily accessible components that I wouldn't have to. I could still make the time crunch and still have it look the way I want to. And one of those was why I chose the distance between the primary and final drive, the two sprockets.
Right.
I ended up going with it, but I wasn't sure. I wanted to make it a little bit more stretched out so that I could lower the seat a little bit. But I wasn't sure that I would even be able to find the parts that I needed to make that happen. With the chain. So as a contingency, I designed it such that I could use the stock pulleys and belt. But it ended up working out, and I was able to find all the parts I needed, so I was able to make it a chain drive, which I was happy about. Yeah,
and it's really cool, too, because you've left the primary exposed, and not just exposed, but out there. I mean, it's really exposed. But then in the kind of the A of the frame just behind it, you made a cover that has this really cool, I don't know if it's engraved or how you did it, but it's the almost the war bonnet style Indian logo, and the chain comes out through two holes in it. And is it made out of copper?
Yeah, so all the extra fairing pieces I'd wanted to do that for a long time, but copper is so expensive, and since Indian was providing the money for the build, I said, hey, I'm going to buy the copper. And no, everything's made of copper, so it is made of copper. And my dad's actually the one. So it was kind of a joint effort between my dad and my wife, that war bonnet logo. So we were contemplating how we could get the chain through, and still have it look stylish. And so one of the things my wife had kind of drawn with a Sharpie on the copper when it was just sitting there one day in the garage. She had drawn the war bonnet logo. And then when my dad came in the following day, because me and my wife were out there till like 2 a.m, my dad came in the following morning, like at 7, 8 in the morning. He looks at it, and when I talked to him about it, he said, "Oh, that's great. We can make like a plate that sits on there." And my wife had kind of drawn it as, intending to cut it out so that it was negative space, so you would see the logo.
Yeah.
So my dad's the one who suggested cutting it out of another piece of copper and then riveting it together, so that way you've got like this like 3D effect. And so that's what we ended up going with. My dad did the scroll work with a scroll saw and cut that logo out. My wife drew it and he cut it out. So again, it's a whole family affair.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you had a really great team helping you out.
Oh yeah, and they're both very artistic and creative, and so any suggestions they had, I was totally up for it.
Yeah. So out of all the things that you did on the bike, you know, and I know it's kind of awkward to for people to talk to you about something like this. Most people are not, you know, really into tooting their own horns, but that's kind of what everybody's asked you to do in this whole process. So I'm going to do the same thing. So out of the whole bike, what do you think is the thing that you're the proudest of that you came up with? You know, that your team had a problem and solved it, or had an idea and was able to execute it. You know, what's kind of one of the aspects of the bike that you're really proud of?
I guess personally it would have to be the front end. Is just one of those things. I had always wanted to do a girder style front end, and I never had the opportunity to do it. Actually, the parts that the two legs from the girder that ended up on this bike I had built years ago for a friend of mine, and that whole project fell through. So they had just been sitting in my yard rusting, and I had really wanted to do it. And when I was drawing up the drawing, I had drawn it with just, you know, plain forks, telescopic forks, and I just kept telling my wife, it just seems like it's missing something. So I quickly drew in the girder, and then she said, "Yeah, that's what you need to do."
It just clicked right away.
Yeah. So I mean, that was one of those things where every day that my dad would come over, we'd work on it together, and I spent a lot of the time, you know, helping him work on the parts that he was helping me with, and I didn't get much of a chance to work on the girder. So that's kind of one of the things that got drawn out a long time.
Yeah.
And then finally my dad said, I'm not going to come over for a few days, and you just concentrate on the front and get it done. So, you know, there was a lot of work there, and it had been sitting in my yard a long time, and it wasn't the straightest thing because it had just been tacked together, and the tacks had kind of broken apart. So I had to really massage it to get it straight again, and then get it all to fit. But that was one of the things. I think there was a lot of time put in that, and I can't even estimate the number of hours, but that's one of the things that I personally am most proud of. But again, it's hard to say as far as the team, because I'm really proud of my family for all the work that they were willing to put in, and all the love that they put into it. So I think that would be personally just the one thing that I'd shout out to me.
There you go. And what I really like about the front end, especially, is that, you know, you've got any kind of fork system on the front end is going to have that idea of two. You got one on each side, but you took the two kind of converging tubes on each side, and you've got the two down tubes on the front of the frame, and the two exhaust pipes, and the two pieces of the swing arm. There's a lot of two repetition of the two that really ties the whole design together from front to back. Was that kind of were you thinking about that? Was that intentional, or am I just reading too much into it?
No, I mean, obviously the forks in the frame, that's kind of, I mean, that's just how it is, you know. But as far as keeping the pipes separate, we definitely wanted to do that so that we can get that kind of snaky flowing lines through the whole thing. And the down tube, the front part of the frame, I definitely wanted the two there just so that it would give a little more, I don't know, just be more visually appealing from that angle, looking at it from the front. And the funny thing is, you know, kind of playing off the two side of that radiator that we use is a motor. So again, like, I have roots in motocross, so I use the motocross wheels and the motocross hubs, and we even got a motocross radiator. And the original radiator is actually two parts. And we ended up using the one because, you know, it seemed to fit better. But we outfitted it with a couple of high flow fans so that we get the airflow through it. And I figured it should be, you know, well equipped based on the extra thickness, and usually those off-road radiators are built. They're overbuilt, you know, because you're thinking of all the debris and things that are going to reduce the efficiency of the radiator. So
right.
So we downgraded, used only one side of the radiator, but I think it came out well. We tried it out. I ran it several miles on a hot New Mexico day. It was about 103, 105 degrees, and you could feel the fan kick on, and you know, it ran fine. The temperature all read fine, so it looked like it was doing good.
Great. So here's another question, because I noticed that the seat from my perspective, just looking at the pictures, the seat looks just like a flat piece of metal. So what's the what's the comfort level? I mean, how hard is it to ride the bike? It's stretched out. It's got the low handlebars, the forward controls, the flat seat. What's it feel like to ride the bike?
So like the flat seat thing it's just something that I like to do normally, just because I like I guess a lot of people have called it like the Mad Max post-apocalyptic kind of look. I just like the real raw, gritty look. And so I took a piece of plate and gave it a little bit of English just so to have a small curvature. And, obviously that's not the most comfortable thing. But again, I guess there's a bit of style over comfort kind of thing. And as far as I'm concerned, it still has I wouldn't say it's the most comfortable ride, but I can definitely ride it, and I'm fine riding it. I've ridden bikes like this. Those are the only kind of street bikes I've ever had. They've been very similar to this, and one of them was my commuter for probably about a little over a year and a half, and I drove where I rode maybe 60 miles one way every day on it, just like that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's doable, and I've done it before. But again, it's not something that I would want to take from New Mexico up to Sturgis by any means.
Well, and speaking of Sturgis, the three finalists, the three final bikes, yours and the Chopper and the Cafe Racer, have been all over the country. They've been to Sturgis and this place, that, and the other. And I know there's a big industry trade show coming up that Indian's going to have a presence at. Have you gotten the bike back yet, or when are you going to get the bike back?
So currently the idea is that we won't get our bikes back until after Daytona Bike Week. So that'll be sometime in March, April timeframe. So I'm looking forward to it, and I guess to kind of go with the theme of the whole project is when I get it back, I'm sure I'm going to do more to it just to make it more moving.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the things with creative types is you're never really satisfied with what you're working on, and it's never really all the way finished. You're just kind of, you have to hit a point where you stop, or you're never going to stop.
Yeah, I've heard some funny quotes about that. Yeah, I think one of them was, an artwork is never finished. It just you just stop working on it. Yeah.
Well, listen, Fred, I want to thank you a tremendous amount for your time and talking about your bike and the Indian Scout Bobber build-off. It's been a really fascinating conversation.
Well, thanks, Wes. Again, I appreciate the opportunity. It's been cool. Just another awesome person I get to meet along the way. This whole process has been amazing, and I can't express my gratitude enough. I'm really blessed at the whole process, and I'm humbled by it. It's been an awesome experience.
All right, man. Take it easy.
Thank you. You too.
Chasing the Horizon is brought to you in Season 2 by Dunlop Motorcycle Tires. Motorcyclists the world over recognize the name Dunlop, and for good reason. With extensive global resources and a commitment to racing disciplines worldwide, Dunlop draws on a vast body of knowledge to develop innovative motorcycle tire technology. Much of this technology quickly makes its way to motorcycle riders, whether they ride on the track, street, or a weekend off-road adventure. Dunlop maintains extensive development and manufacturing capabilities in the U.S., focused on developing groundbreaking new products. Dunlop has been building tires using domestic and foreign materials in Buffalo, New York since 1920, and to this day is the largest manufacturer building motorcycle tires in the USA. Point your web browser to dunlopmotorcycletires.com to learn more about Dunlop's promotions, find the right tires for your bike, and use a searchable index of hundreds of Dunlop motorcycle tire dealers across North America. Please take some time to engage with us on the internet. Chasing the Horizon is on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And of course, you can visit the website at chasingthehorizon.us for show notes and links for all the sponsors, news items, and guests. There's a mailing list with exclusive content and giveaways only open to subscribers. You can sign up for that at tinyletter.com/chasingthehorizon. Thank you for coming back for the 35th episode of Chasing the Horizon. Episode 36 will feature a wrap-up of the AIMExpo and will be out on October 29th. Thanks for listening. We'll see you out there somewhere on the road. Or off it. Ride safe.